you have to know where you're going, because it's an abbreviated form, which is quite intense. You know, you don't get to do the narrative quite so much. What you're simply guiding guiding the actors. You're guiding the director, and you're giving us mostly dialogue. You're taking us from action to dialogue to action. You know, and you're making us feel through your direction in that way. So you don't have the luxury that I do of a lot of description and, you know, layering that way. You layer through through what you're having your characters do and say. Also, you're layering in terms of what you're having your characters not do and say. You know, how they interact and that sort of thing. Your form is, you have a definite beginning, middle, and end. You know, and your middle, the arc is broken up into three spots, three places, where you have to hit them. You have to hit them just right, because the timing of a screenplay has to be very precise. And you only have a certain number of pages that you get to work with. Exactly. You know, if you try to take us more than 130 pages, they're going to cut you off at the knees. You know, if you go under 90, they're going to cut you off at the knees. You know, so it's really in terms of what you're writing in your screenplay work that will tell you, you know, how you make those kinds of decisions. You will also need to know your characters so well in their interactions that you will know how to write that, because of the complexity of doing a screenplay. That kind of writing is really hard. I've done it. You know, but it's really hard because you're moving from action to dialogue to action, and you're making us feel all the things you want us to feel through that form. You know, we don't get to read what you say in terms of what the clock says, or the time of day, or the temperature, or anything like that. We don't get to know any of that in terms, except in terms of what you give to the director. Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, your choice helps the director or the casting agent to determine who can do that for you, who can bring out your character like that, you know, so that you don't have like a Leslie Uggams doing a Hercule Poirot, for example, if you're writing in that form.
Okay.
This lady has a question.
Yes, ma'am. So you talked, earlier you spoke about drafting and rewriting, writing and rewriting, and you even said that the original was like 4 times as long. So I guess I'm asking, does drafting and moving from, you know, your raw, pure ideas to the finished product, is that necessarily sacrificing some of those ideas and some of those stories and some of that material? Because that all, I'm sure everything in the original, you know, with the original length all had value, different amounts of value and different contributions to the final project. But do you necessarily have to sacrifice some of that in the drafting and in the revision process?
Well, in terms of publishing today, yeah, unfortunately, and you know, and I didn't know that. I mean, and I don't know that I would have done anything differently when I was writing it, in terms of length and whatnot. I just simply wrote it. But in terms of what makes it through the publishing process today, you know, there are certain book lengths that publishers will only allow you, or they won't publish your book. You know, so it has to be cut. So what you hope is to employ people who can help you to keep the integrity of your story and characters as certain things are having to be sacrificed. And that's where I think that for a writer, the symbiotic relationship between you and your personal editor, not the book editor necessarily, but your personal editor, is so valuable, because she or he, mine happens to be a female, but she is such an extension of who you are, plus what she brings to the table to help you, hopefully, to keep that. Now you're going to lose some. That's just kind of part of the process, but hopefully he or she is good enough to help maintain the integrity of what you can live with. At least if you want to get published.
So it's very apparent that you know all of your characters and that there are characters you hate and likewise there are characters that you love. And for the characters that you do love, is it difficult for you to reveal any misgivings they have or character flaws and then recognize them and then reveal them in the story for the audience to recognize too?
No, because they're people. They're not just forms or constructs. They're people, and people have the good and bad aspects of them. In fact, we love them for their imperfections. The hardest part for me is having to let go of a character, having to surrender a character. I can't. It's like going to a funeral. I can't stand this.
You mentioned earlier that you rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until you feel like you shouldn't rewrite anymore. But me personally, whenever I read my writing, I just want to rewrite it until the sun comes up. Like, I'll never stop rewriting, but I feel like there is a certain point where you have to stop and you have to accept what it is, and especially when you're giving it to other people who will also rewrite it for you. Where do you reach a point where you know this is what it's supposed to be? It cannot be raked over anymore.
When my personal editor wrenches the copy from my hand. Otherwise, I'll just keep going over it and over it and over. Because today, you might have a particle of sentence that just seems so superb, you just can't live without it. And then tomorrow, you get one word will do, And that's a process, And that's where I think that the symbiotic relationship between you and the personal editor is so valuable. Because, like in my case, my personal editor will simply say, "Stop," and take it from me. And that was pretty much the only way that because if you're a perfectionist, you just keep working it and keep working it. I wish it was like I wish it were like clay, where you could actually see the form and there's no more area for detail work or anything, but there's always room to add something or take something away. I wish I knew when you could stop. With Alex, what was interesting with him was when he could pace it, when he could feel it, when he could feel the rhythm of the sentence, when it felt right for the character, then he would say, "Take it to white." Maybe someday I'll grow into that part, but not yet.
Well, there's one more thing. I'll just tell you, there are students, I think everybody except for Dr. Traylor, who's just come in, and the classes shift at the 5:10 mark, so we'll stop here, but those who can stay and who would like to have the book signed will do. But what I want to do is one little last temptation for those of you who haven't read the book yet. It's my favorite part.
Okay.
So just to set the stage a little bit, we come to know who Mary is, but Mary has a cane immediately when you see her, and you don't know why. So this is the part where we begin to, I lost the page, I can't believe this. I had my finger in it for a very long time. This is the part where we come to know how or why she has the cane. And my reading isn't even close to as good as yours, so I'll try to do a paragraph or two justice. She was young. That day was warm and pleasant, and she stood on the docks with two of her friends, skipping pebbles across the gentle chop. The white man's voice over her shoulder had been harsh as he spoke to her. Before she caught herself, she snapped back sharply. The man's face loomed so clear in her mind, she could still see the stubble on his chin and smell his rank odor. A brick house of a man, maybe 10 years older than she. His face had an unkempt look despite a morning shave. His eyes glowed with pure hate, and his bottom lip twisted cruelly. His partner said, "You gonna let that nigga wench get away with back talking you like that?" In a flash, the younger woman grabbed Mary, lifted her off the weathered pier of the small harbor, and threw her legs over one of the handrails. Mary's panicked friends screamed and ran. "Don't you move, gal," he ordered as her body dangled over the dock. When he yanked off a long piece of the rail wood, She put her hands over her eyes and squeezed them tight. The last she remembered was the howl that tore from her throat as his crude weapon bludgeoned her left knee. Days later, Mary regained consciousness. Visiting friends told her that the other girls had come back and dragged her home, where her father, Tug, went nearly crazy at the sight of his daughter. Mary's mother died when the girl was very young, so Tug sent for Miss Effie, a medicine woman who doctored on her day and night. Mary would never again walk right again, Miss Effie said, but at least she was alive. And so her father then begins to nurture her. He says, no daughter of mine gonna be a cripple. Just as the sun eased out of the crimson gold bed of horizon and began its job of soaking up kernels of fog, Tug took Mary into the thick woods, where he presented her with a polished oak walking stick he used with all of his skills to carve. And to its round head he etched the letter M. Not a cane, he insisted, a walking stick, because that's what you gonna do. Mary squatted on a flat stone, complaining to the ground. Tug put his hand under her arms and lifted her. They stared at each other for a long minute, saying nothing. Then he stretched out to the tapered column of walking stick again. She could hear the calls of nameless birds and feel the light wind blowing out of the trees. She gulped and inhaled the sharp, clean smell of pine. Slowly and painfully, she reached out and grabbed hold of the walking stick. So he begins to set her paces for her, and she begs her father to have mercy, saying that her knee is ruined, that she'll never be able to walk. He begins to work with her. He continues to work with her, and I'm paraphrasing here. And I start reading again. She was astonished at how quickly and deftly she fought back, because he literally begins to fight her, because he thinks that she needs to know how to defend herself. Not trying to hurt her, but practicing, trying to help her to defend herself. One blow caught her in the ribs. Another exploded off her shoulder, tearing her blouse loose and sending a spurt of blood, red and shimmering, into the sunlight. His next blow was aimed toward her neck, when she countered and threw him off. After a while, she was tired of defending herself. Now, she was on the attack. She wheeled around with a warrior scream and came at Tug like lightning, spiking out of the sky and shattering to submissiveness anything in its path. Next day, Tug tied her legs to two small trees, leaving her arms free, with a walking stick in her hand. His blows toward her crisscrossed the moisture-laden air of the forest, ruffling the wind with the forest. Mary fought off blow after blow, and even sent a few his way. The following day, he pinned her to the ground with her arms over her head. The only way she could fight back was with her legs. She cried out in pain when a blow connected to her inner thigh, tearing open an angry gash. Lightning cracked among the trees and thunder cannoned along the metal gray sky. So you see the imagery and so much of the language that helps us to see how she becomes as fierce as she is. And then that chapter closes. Tug launched out of the wood's darkness, arms high, wood staff in his hand, ready to strike, when Mary fell to the wet mess of ground and caught him in a pincer hold. By now she's winning. Both legs held him so tightly he screamed bloody murder. After the rain let up, the smell of jasmine filled the air, and clutches of low-hanging clouds gave way to extraordinary streaks of sunlight. That was when Mary and Tug wearily trudged home, arm in arm.
I would say you felt that rhythm.
Please join me again in thanking Dr. Haley for sharing. The books are available downstairs. As you know, you'll have to purchase them and then bring them back up, and we'll be here for another 30 minutes or so, signing copies for those of you who would like to have them personalized or just signed. Okay, thank you all so much for coming.